Welcome to video 7 of series 3, and in this video I'll go over player input. And of course your player needs some way to interact with your game, and input is the most obvious way. I'll show two ways of doing it. One is get key and one is get button. So in Unity I'll make a new C# script, so I will call this shoot. Alright, and I will then show you. It's really simple, actually. It's very simple. Now, when you're checking for player input, you do put it in the update function. You do put it there so that, because the player can press something at any time. So if you put it in update, then it'll be a responsive feel. You know, there's no fudgy feel to the controls whatsoever. So that's an appropriate place to check for inputs. Now, you could write the code directly inside of update. Or what I prefer to do is to make a new method. But before all that, namespace. So this is called chapter 1. And I'll just take my code here. Just cut it. Alright, done, save. And then I'll make a new method, void check for input. And I've never told you this before, but all methods by default are private, so it's as if in C#, any type, any variable you write, if you don't declare it private, it is private by default. So it is as if I had written that, but you don't need to write the private actually. Only if you write public, if you need it to be public, then you need to write the public there and make the function public so it's accessible from other scripts. Alright, so I hadn't mentioned that before, thought I should at the moment. Alright, so for checking for a player input, you need an if statement. So if, then inside of that, if input, so you use this one, the capital I, if input dot get key, and in this particular case, it's going to be shooting. So when the player presses their left mouse button, then I want a shooting to happen, right? So it's probably get key down is the most suitable. If you put get key, then while the player, so long as the player is holding it down, it'll keep on happening and happening and happening. Actually, why don't I do that, get key? Because I'll teach you something else as well at the same time, which is very important, which is fire rate. So anyway, I'll say if input get key, and then brackets. Now you have to specify which key. So you say key code dot, and then you can see all the keys there. Alpha, 0, 1, 2 are the all those number keys at the top of your keyboard, well, the upper area anyway. And num, there'll be num ones as well, wherever they were called, if I can even remember what they're called. And they are for the right side. There we go, keypad. That's what I couldn't remember what it was called, the keypad. So those are for the numpad side of the keyboard. But I don't want all that. I just want mouse 0. Mouse 0 is the left mouse button. And so if it's pressed, then just do a debug .log key pressed. Alright. And what am I doing there? Just saving. Okay. And in the update function now, that's where I'll check for input. It's an appropriate place for it. Okay, now I need to attach the script to something. And, oh yeah, I'll just, the inconsistent line endings business. Let me go back, come back, open it, convert. So you'll see this happen over and over and over while you're going through this series. Probably in a later version of Unity it'll be gone. That won't be a problem anymore, because this is the very first version where Unity has made the big jump of making Visual Studio its default IDE, Integrated Development Environment, the place where you write code. So it's been a big jump, so I guess there would be things like that. So maybe by the time you're watching this a lot later, it's not an issue anymore and you don't have to do that sort of stuff. Right. Now, where do I want to fit this? Because in the next video, I'm going to show you raycasting. That's how you do like detection of stuff, shooting and stuff. So I want to put it, I'm just going to put it on the first person character. I won't explain it now. I'll explain it in the next video. Just take my word for it. Just put it on the first-person character. It doesn't matter. You can put it anywhere. It'll work. It's just that for the next video, it will be very convenient that it's on this first-person character, which has the camera, and this is able to rotate up and down when the player moves their mouse. Okay, so if I run now, and it's waiting for an input, if I press my left mouse button, you see there, key pressed. And it happened 6 times. I only just clicked, but it's very fast. If I keep it down, oh, there's lots and lots of messages getting generated. Key press, key press. Now, of course, if you were shooting a gun in the game, you wouldn't want that behavior. It's getting called way too much, and basically the player will be firing hundreds of bullets in seconds, and you don't want that. So you use a very common coding technique is to have a fire rate. So private, and you use this not just for like simulating like a gun in the game, it's just for controlling how often stuff gets called in the update function. You do this sort of stuff. Like you may have an enemy who will do a detection every second or so, and that way you can have many enemies and they do detections maybe between 0.8 seconds and 1.2 seconds, and that way they're not getting called every frame, and it makes your game a lot lighter. It makes your game a lot more efficient. Right, so private float fire rate, I'll call it. So this can get fired, say, maybe 0.3 of a second, 0.3 times, 0.3 of a second, and so you'll fire just a little bit over 3 times a second. And then private float next fire. Okay, so how do you use it? So what you have to say is, in this condition here, you have to say and, so 2 ampersands is and. So if the left mouse button has been pressed, and time dot time, this is a Unity thing. So remember, go read the code reference, go read the Unity code, the scripting stuff, and so that you understand what time dot time is. But it is actually the time. So the time, well, it explains it. Oh, what's that? The time at the beginning of this frame. This is the time in seconds since the start of the game. Very good. That's a nice, clean explanation, better than whatever rubbish I might have said. So time dot time is greater than next fire. Okay, so when time is greater than the next fire, so the very first time you start the game, next fire is in fact 0. If you're not assigned anything, it's in fact 0 as a float. And of course, it'll immediately register. Yeah, it'll say, look, time, it'll be whatever, 2 seconds into the game, and the player's pressing left mouse, it will get registered. Then what you need to do is say, next fire is equal to time plus fire rate. So that way you increment it, right? So for example, just imagine it is currently 1 second into the game. Next fire is 0. You press the left mouse button. Yes, time is 1 second, which is greater than 0. So yes, these instructions will operate. They will happen. They will be fired. So then I say that the next time, the next fire is now equal to 1 second plus the fire rate, 0.3. So that is 1.3. So my next fire is 1.3, and of course I run the debug.log. Now because this happens so fast in update, it'll happen again before I can blink my eye, and it'll then check again. Yes, the mouse button is still down, but it'll find that, wait a minute, time is still just 1 second, 1.05 of a second, and it isn't greater than 1.3, so don't carry out these instructions, okay? So that's what a fire rate does. So if I jump back in, and now I can just hold it down, and you can see it's firing off at a much more steady pace, which is just over 3 times a second. Alright, so that was one way of doing input. I'll copy that, and I'll comment it out. I'll paste it in here, and this time I'll change the input. So now it's going to be if input.get button. So this is different. Alright, so let me just leave that. I'm not going to save it. I'll go back to Unity. What is a get button? Well, these are buttons that you can set in Edit, Project Settings, Input. and you'll see axes here, and you can expand it. Now, just a quick trick with anything, folders or whatever, if you hold on Alt and then you click on the arrow, it'll fully expand everything, and if you press Alt and you click on it, it'll fully collapse it. Okay, so just a quick tip for you there. And that applies to everything. It's very important with folders, especially when you got more and more stuff in them, especially if you want to just expand like the standard assets folder all in one hit, see what's inside, and just collapse it all in one hit as well. Okay, anyway, just getting sidetracked there. So the one I'm interested in is the Fire one. It has an alternative positive button of mouse 0 and a positive button of left control. So this is the input get button, and this is the one that I'd like to change. The name is what's important here. This is what I have to call by code. It's called Fire 1. But just before I do that, I want to change this. I don't want the player to be able to use left control to fire, to shoot. That's arcadey, I guess, and this is an FPS, and in this case, I don't want control. Look, I just want control. That's it. Okay, that's all. Don't need to make up reasons. Alright, so name Fire 1. And this is what I will call. Actually, why don't I show you something else just before I get to that. Now, since I've already set up the thing in build settings, I've got my scene there. A quick method of building and running your game is to just press Control B. So you will do that a lot as well, just while you're learning and of course while you're developing too. Okay. Alright. Oh, sorry. What I meant to do, let me do that again. I meant to show you where you can change the keys. So there's the inputs. So these are the inputs right here. So when you build a game, this is where you can change the inputs here. Now, in order to be able to have, like most normal games, where you can change the controls from within the game, it's a lot more complicated. I personally use an external package on the asset store that allows me to set up a different control system, which I can then edit through a UI, which I make up for the game. So this is good for this sort of thing, and for most applications it's fine, but if you need your player to be able to change their controls in the game, then you can't use Unity's default input manager. You do have to go get something from the asset store. There are a couple of options there, which are pretty good. Okay, but anyway, continuing on. So if input.get button Fire 1, okay, so now it will fire. So I can go ahead and hit play, and if I hold my fire key down, there you go, see, key pressed. Good. So it's done. That's it. You've seen 2 ways of taking player input, and that you should put it in the update function, and also told you about fire rates. Okay, that's it for this tutorial. See you in the next, and thanks for watching.